In the case of nuclear or radiological fallout, people living around potential targets such as military bases and chemical plants may be advised to evacuate.
Well, hello, Sublation Media viewers and readers and listeners and people. It is the Sublation Magazine live stream this week. It is, I'm here, I'm back, and with me is Alfie Bown. Ashley is in London. She's setting up for a live stream with Ted Reese. Actually, she sent me the Theory Pleb and one other Marxist whose name has escaped me at the moment, for which I'll look up. But she's going to be doing an interview on Marxism. I believe it's going to probably cover the idea of a terminal crisis in capitalism. Ted Reese will be there, and it's going to be on location. It's a very exciting stream, but it will only be available for patrons. So if you want to watch our second stream today, the Parrot Room stream, you have to sign up on our Patreon to see that. We might release it if it's truly brilliant, and we might release it later. But today we're going to be, for the public, we're going to be talking about Sublation Magazine and the essay that you just published there, Alfie, called "What is a Boss?" So Alfie,
Great. Thanks for having me on. I feel like I've been on the show a lot recently.
Yeah,
too much. But we're going on holiday soon.
Well, yeah, I have that feeling all the time that I'm on too much. But you've also been on your own show on the channel, which is going to be getting its own YouTube channel, and it has already a podcast, an RSS feed up. It's a sci-fi show. So before we dive in on What is a Boss, tell me what you've been doing on sci-fi lately.
Great. Yeah, no, I do want to say that actually, because we're also, I don't want to just keep plugging things, but we've also got a new thing on our Patreon, which I'm really enjoying with Elliot, where basically what we're doing is kind of like courses, really. I guess we don't sort of know much ourselves, but we're basically reading key texts from the history of psychoanalysis. So we read Freud's essay, Criminals from a Sense of Guilt, which kind of argues that like criminals sometimes commit crimes because they feel guilty already and want to attach guilt to something, which is fascinating. And today we did an episode on Lacan's Mirror Stage essay. So really like foundational psychoanalytic texts. And it turns out Eliot's got an unbelievable narrative voice for like reading out these texts in a very lovely audiobook way.
Maybe I should hire him to do our audiobooks for us. So start rolling out.
Exactly. And later I'm going to say what Michael's just said in the comments. But it's really interesting. Like, people are learning with us. It's only like £2 to do our Patreon. I don't know what, $3 or something. So like it's going to be a little series of courses really that you can do with us. Like just like talking about key psychoanalytic texts and going through them. They're going to hopefully form an archive, which is like introductions to all these critical texts from the history of psychoanalysis and so on. And then over on the main channel, which is all the free stuff, we've had Todd McGowan and Mary Ruti on recently, who have both been great, so people can check that out. And next week we'll have Julie Resch, who has written this Sublation Magazine article, Psychoanalysis as Gaslighting, which has probably been our most, it's actually done really well. It's overtaken even the Zizek one, but it's also been our most kind of provocative. People have been getting pissed off on social media about Julie Resch saying that psychoanalysis is a form of gaslighting, but it's the best form of gaslighting according to her. So she'll be on this Friday to talk about the essay and so on. So yeah, all that stuff's going on Sci-Fi, which I think is really great.
That essay is kind of a troll, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's not. Yeah, it's not. She's not really against psychoanalysis, is she?
No, she's not. No, she's a psychoanalyst. But I'd say it's half. The essay is half correct and then half playful, and I think it's really interesting. But yeah, we'll get into all that on Friday. So
yeah, I want to watch that. I'm excited about the Sci-Fi podcast and how it's going to develop. I feel like there's a small community of psychoanalysts and psychoanalysts. Is that the patient? Am I getting that? Yes, that's right. Around the world, and that these people need their own podcast, that the one that they can rely on to defend psychoanalysis against the naysayers, of which there are many. So that's what I kind of think of Sci-Fi as being all about. Is I recently started reading Russell Jacoby's book called Social Amnesia. Have you heard of this book?
Yeah, no, I haven't read it though.
And it's a book about how Freudian theory was put aside in favor of ego psychology by socialists, by people on the left.
Right,
And
well,
Russell Jacoby
yeah.
is defending psychoanalysis is more radical than the
But
socialism.
I mean, that happened it was people on the left that accused Freud of anti-feminism and all that, so, there's a long history there of this kind of history. And actually, it's very interesting. I mean, one of the things that we were talking recently with Patricia Geravici about on Sci-Fi was this, her view is that Freud is a better feminist than the people who accuse him of being a patriarch, and to look at this history. And so it is indeed the left that have contributed to this misconception of psychoanalysis or whatever, I think. So I think that's an interesting point. I'll have to look at that.
Yeah. It's an old book. It's from like the 70s, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, but it's worth picking up again, Russell Jacoby. And I reached out to him, tried to see he's still around, and hopefully we'll get him onto the podcast sometime soon. If anyone knows Russell, tell him I want to talk to him.
I love people that are still around, when people are like old enough that you actually have to comment that they're alive.
Well, it's just based on
those are my favorite podcast guests.
It's just based on when this book was, published. I'm going to look that up right now.
I hope I make it to the age where people are saying he's still around. Actually,
yeah.
I'd have done well in my career if people.
I feel like I may be already there, but in any case, yes, Russell Jacoby, not dead. So
he's not coming on now.
He's not. No, he should come on because we just let everyone know he's alive and kicking and doing well. He's actually had some books out in recent years. One critiquing the realm of the academy, critiquing academics for being cowed and basically, I think it's a critique of the university that might be deemed to be kind of conservative by some people, but in any case, someone says here the trolls will set us free. So let's talk about what is a boss. Now, this is a movie I haven't seen called The Good Boss.
Yeah.
But now I want to see it. And having read your essay, I've decided that I will root for Javier Bardem in the movie. That I relate to him. I want to be him. I worry that I may be becoming him, and that if I do, I want him to prevail. Is this the wrong reaction to your piece?
No, I don't think so. I mean, so shall I just tell people, because I think people probably won't have seen it either, because it's been in UK and US cinemas recently. I actually watched it on the plane, and it is like available for streaming, but like on one of those platforms, not Mubi, but something like that, where you have to pay like £15 or something. But I'll just say what the film is. But let me say that the context. Like, I've been thinking a lot recently about basically why as we've discussed on this channel for over the last years, Sublation, like how we are trapped between, on the one hand, a kind of conservatism and a traditional kind of conservative capitalism, and on the other hand, this kind of like rise of liberal, a newer kind of cultural woke liberal capitalism and so on. And we've been talking over years about where does this leave the left? Where does this kind of apparent binary between your sort of conservative traditionalist right and rising liberal wokeness, where does that leave the left, and what is the left in this context? So, and when I watched this film, I really thought it had something to say about this question, which is very much a kind of sublation media question, I guess. So I think it was really interesting in that context. But shall I just basically say what happens in the film?
Yeah, tell people what happens. But before you do, someone asks, is Doug Alfie's boss?
Yes.
And I want to say
for now,
not really. I mean, kind of. You have a small role that you get paid for in Sublation, but then on Sci-Fi, you and I are complete co-equals and more than that. I help with. I'm your employee on Sci-Fi.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So this is a neoliberal universe where no one's a boss anymore, and there's no central hub. Everything's atomized and broken off into pieces, and It's just about intellectual property and so on and so forth. So Alfie is my boss and I'm his boss because we're socialists, man. We're equal.
Well, actually, that's an interesting point. I mean, I don't know about this because like there's some like socialist argument. I agree with you about actually, but some you often hear from like union socialists that like you really need to know who your boss is and you mustn't be too friendly with each other. Don't let your boss kind of co-opt you with gestures of friendship and ask you out for dinner because they're just trying to exploit you and so on. So everything needs to be formal and professionalized. Whereas you're obviously going for much more of this kind of vague notion of but everyone's each other's boss, which is presumably designed so you can exploit my laborers more efficiently, right?
It's not what I would prefer. I mean, I would prefer just to be the straightforward king of the hill boss. But unfortunately, I find myself in a universe where that isn't possible. So, and I don't have the financial backing to really pull that off. So everybody has to.
I'm also pro being taken out for dinner by your boss. If anyone wants to employ me in future, I would like to be taken out for dinner and drinks. And you can say things to me like we're good friends or whatever, and then you can leverage that friendship against me when you need me to do something. I'm all for that. That's fine.
What? No, yeah, right. As long as it kind of works both ways. But I have found that in my time as an employee that my friendship with the boss really had very severe limits. Like I could not ask for that much out of friendship with the boss.
Right, exactly. No, I will. Yeah, agreed. I need to be promoted ahead of Ashley or whatever.
Well, that's not going to happen, Alfie. You're a good friend, but no,
I'm of course joking. Yeah. So anyway, look, this film is extremely funny and it is a really good film. So it's nice to just talk about a film that I don't know, one can feel like happy and passionate about for once. But it's really interesting. Basically, it takes place in the course of a week, and it's all set around this scales factory, like a weighing scales, like traditional scales. And the character that Javier Bardem plays is the boss of this scales factory, and he's very much what's the way to say this? He's very much the kind of patriarch, right? He not only runs the company really efficiently, and there's all these happy employees, but he also sort of runs the society a little bit, the micro society set around his company. So, for example, he, one of his managers is having a tough time because his wife's thinking of leaving him. So, the boss takes the wife out for coffee, convinces her to stay with the husband, and he becomes a better, more efficient worker again. And then things like, he sort of, there's some young thugs in the community who are threatening to cause violence, right? The boss turns up and offers them a bit of work experience so that they don't, go mugging people and so on. So he's not only the boss in the sense of, he's running a business, but he's also this kind of patriarch from the area, and who kind of is the head of society in this country.
I mean, it sounds like he's a great boss. I mean, he's fixed your marriage for you. He's taken the thugs off the street and made them into workers. He has a civilizing effect on everybody.
Exactly. And it's very much this kind of hierarchical society, younger men in the film, women admire him and so on. And he also, importantly, has affairs and so on, and sleeps with young women who work in the company and so on, but he keeps his wife happy at the same time. So he's really also this kind of healthy balance between like virility, libido, and so on, but also responsibility and patriarchy and power. So he's the responsible father figure for the society, but he's also the virile, masculine, sexual success story. He's like a Tony Soprano, right? Who sort of has all these characteristics and kind of runs the company well. Now, the film what's great about the film and the comedy of the film is it takes place in a week. It's like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and so on. I think it runs Monday to Monday. So from Monday to Wednesday, he's running the company like this, right? But by Wednesday, things get a bit different. And you start moving away from this traditional capitalist, perfectly balanced, with all the kind of scales metaphors, society of traditional conservative capitalism, let's say, and you get a kind of neoliberal woke culture developing. You get things like race activism in the film. There's like an Arabic employee who sort of refuses the boss's kind of power dominance over the workplace. And then there's this Me Too moment where the affair he's having with the intern starts to threaten to come out and get rid of the place of the boss at the top of society. Now, in the end, what happens is there's a Me Too. The girl he's had an affair with blackmails him based on the Me Too. She ends up having a better relationship with the Arabic guy who is a kind of race activist who has said, I've had enough of this kind of white patriarchal boss. I'm going to overthrow you and so on. And what happens is essentially they win out. The master is removed, right? And this is what in my essay I wrote about as kind of castration, right? So we could say that for the first 3 days of the film, Monday to Wednesday, he's totally uncastrated. He's the figure of power. He's the phallic symbol at the center of society, both sexually and familiarly, economically. Then he becomes the castrated master, cheated on, cuckolded, blackmailed. He loses all his power. He ends up hiding in the closet because he can't bear to be seen at work. He's totally a figure of castration. But what is really interesting about this film is it presents this as not a progressive thing. And I think it's therefore an interesting critique of where we're at with liberal capitalism, because we are in this society of castration. I'm not saying I'm against Me Too in general. I mean, I'm not saying that right now. But we live in a world where castrating bosses is part of the functioning of society, right? Whether that's because they're too white, they're too male, they're too patriarchal, they've had an affair, whatever. We have moved from the moment of this kind of uncastrated capitalism into an era which we're maybe just coming out the end of now, I don't know, of castrating bosses. Castrating bosses has become a function of contemporary liberal society, I think. And the film really shows this move, and it also criticizes it, because what happens in the film, to come to the kind of ending, not without giving everything away, those new bosses, those new people, and we finish the film with a female and a non-white person in a position of power, but with all of the inequality and the tragedies of capitalism very much in place. And without giving too much away about the plot, the film really turns to that position in the ending and says, this has changed. We've fixed things on the level of representation by castrating our bosses, getting rid of some of those traditional patriarchs who, ran society for a long time. But what has stepped in its place has not changed capitalism itself, hasn't changed inequality. So it might superficially have ushered in, people into positions of power. So now we've got, in the end of the film, we've got women and Arabic men in the phallic position of uncastrated boss, right? Whereas we've castrated the white patriarch in order to allow those people to rise into that position, but the structure remains the same. And for me, this makes it a fun, comedic film, which is a real critique of contemporary capitalism, but also a kind of Marxist film, which is interested in showing what's happened to us in our society over the last 2 decades, or 1 decade, let's say. We have castrated our bosses, but we've not removed or changed our economic system into in any way fairer or better one.
I feel like this is the era of castrated bosses. And I guess in the UK, the last castrated boss would be Liz Truss, right? I mean,
exactly. It's an obsession, isn't it? Liz Truss is a brilliant example. I guess or even Matt Hancock, who's currently on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, and the British media are desperate for us to focus on that rather than, let's say, for example, Russia and Ukraine, but that's for another day. But, we are obsessed with, this Liz Truss versus a lettuce, Matt Hancock looking stupid on I'm a Celebrity. This is the castrated bosses. We've actually not got leaders and figureheads of the uncastrated boss, but what we have is plenty of castrated bosses who form the sort of structural way of thinking about what we're doing. And it allows us to think we're progressing and doing something positive by criticizing, laughing at, removing these people. But this is the trick. We're missing something here. Anyway, I'll talk about that in a bit. But this is
someone asked, is Doug castrated? To go back to the, and I will say,
not. Can we have an
No, I am not. I'm fine. Okay. So
this is a good comment. This is an interesting comment. Putin is uncastrated. I wonder whether this era of uncastrated bosses is a Western, US, Europe phenomenon.
Well, I kind of feel as though the division between the traditional patriarchal, uncastrated, powerful boss and the castrated boss of the neoliberal era, who was really more of an expert and a technocrat than a figure of social and political authority, is divided up between the East and the West. Is Putin the alternative to the West's attachment to the technocratic expert boss? But the other thing I wonder is whether or not we may, even in the West, be turning away from that now old neoliberal boss who is just an expert, a technocrat, maybe tries to be your friend. Because I think actually a boss that tries to be your friend, that's relatively new too. That's that sensitive new age, everybody's the same, we all work in cubicles. True. Kind of boss. And I figure like instead what we may be turning back to is a more traditional form of authority as we try to onshore industry, clarify national boundaries, and restructure the global system.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. The danger here, I agree. The danger here with this completely inadequate obsession with castrated bosses, this entering into the age of castrated bosses, is that it's obviously going to lead to a kind of backlash. You know, it's obvious because it's not going to be satisfying because the economic system and the power structures that are there remain firmly in place. So what looks like is being sold to us as a progressive narrative, castrating those, whoever it might be that need it, then is completely unsatisfying, and you're left with a series of castrated bosses. Of course, what that's going to do is open the door for a return to a kind of traditionalist, uncastrated father figure. But I suppose what I wanted to do is again get that exactly to think about this from the perspective I tried to introduce it from. Like, what does the left do here? Right? Clearly, we don't want, and we shouldn't fall into the trap, which some of our perhaps rival publications sometimes tend to, of going too easily back to this traditional idea of reconstructing, a structure from the old days that has a kind of traditionalism and hierarchical system that is, problematic. And we were right to, problematic is a word I hate myself for saying, but that we were right to criticize. But then also we need to reject with just as much kind of strength this culture of castrated bosses, which tricks us into thinking we're moving progressively while leaving the system completely in place. So what do we do from the leftist perspective? Do we rehabilitate figures of the master? If so, how do we do that? Do we like go in an anarchist direction? And I don't know. What do you think? What would you do? I
don't know. I think about Todd McGowan's work and this, and I guess by extension of Freud, and of course Zizek as well. The idea of the recognition of castration as being basically essential to subjectivity of any kind.
Yes. You presumably read my article, which said,
I read What is a Boss. Yeah, I read that. Right. Yeah. But I forgot that you said that. You said that at the end. Both Freud and Lacan pointed out that we are all castrated, men, women, those in position of power, and those subjected to it. Right. That's right. So, all right, fine. I remember what Alfie Bown said. The uncastrated, penetrating mind of Alfie Bown remembered this as well. And that is that given that that's the case, the whole idea of a castrated boss or of a boss that is severely constrained and also in danger, the precarity of being the boss, maybe. That is actually not tremendously different than the more traditional, supposedly more secure kind of hierarchical structure of the past. But the question is, what do we do with the understanding that that subjectivity itself requires castration, and therefore there really are no natural bosses, but instead those bosses are put there by the masses, by the people, by the workers, by the structure of production. What do we do with that information? And I think one of the ways to deny the responsibility of the collective and our own individual responsibility is to say, oh, well, the problem is this uncastrated boss. If we could just cut him down to size, then we could all operate freely and fairly. And that overlooks the way your own behavior and social reproduction is already setting up the boss, and the real change will have to come from the castrated majority rather than at the top.
Yeah, I agree with that. No, exactly. And no, it's actually good that, it's interesting that we both accidentally said the same thing there, because, this is really important. And I guess I just want to respond quickly to this comment about girl bosses. It's a great phrase for this. And, I don't want to get myself in too much trouble, but this is the reason why girl boss is a stupid concept is because it's precisely what I'm trying to get at here with this film. This film is about a girl boss, and it's precisely the fact that this is castrating. The concept of girl boss means to castrate one traditional, apparently uncastrated figure and replace it with another uncastrated figure. That is, as Doug was saying, unpsychoanalytic, because the very important point about castration, and this is actually fascinating stuff, because it's why feminists didn't like Freud, because they thought the castration theory was the key to that, because it was like saying women are envious of men's cocks. Now, that's not what Freud was saying, and it's certainly not what later psychoanalysts like Lacan were really keen to stress. That the problem here is we're all castrated: men, women, people in positions of power, people not in positions of power. For me, this is this is why I think psychoanalysis plays a role in anti-capitalism, because it is universal. It looks for universal things that speak to us as subjects across identity categories, race categories, gender categories, right? Mm-hmm. So, you might be a white, wealthy boss or a working class, aspirational black woman, but you're both castrated and you both have a kind of lack which is foundational to subjectivity in this sense. And psychoanalysis, by pointing out these things, can allow us to develop solidarity that operates across gender and racial divides, let's say, and overthrows and possibly then through that universality we could have a better, different, non-capitalist system, right, where we wouldn't just be celebrating someone for being a girl boss, but we would be this is actually, isn't it like part of Nina Power's ancient argument about Sarah Palin in One Dimensional Woman that, we would have talked about 10 years ago, that, this kind of feminism isn't feminism. And that's also creeping back in. And we need to stress that and think about that. And I think psychoanalysis can be that ally of anti-capitalism in this way.
Yeah. Someone asks, Anonymous asks, everyone where I work is required to go through DEI training once a month. It's Robin DiAngelo stuff. How does that relate to the idea of the castrated boss?
What is DEI training?
Well, you know who Robin DiAngelo is?
Ish. You better give me
She wrote a book on white privilege, and so you get training on how to overcome your white privilege, or how to overcome your inherent cultural racism. What is the title of Robin DiAngelo's book? I forgot. I think it is just White Privilege, but it may.
I remember it. I never read it.
It's called White Fragility. Is one.
We have it too. Diversity, equality, and inclusion. Yeah. We have it too at the university, with different acronyms. But yeah, I mean, how does this relate to? Yeah, it does, and again, I don't want to, I feel like I should be careful, but, we want equality and inclusion and diversity. I don't know if we want those terms, but we want to achieve those things. But
Mm-hmm.
like what we can say is that those kind, if you've ever been in one of those things, I mean, I've been in them in an academic context, they tend very much to be focused on identity categories rather than structures. And this is precisely the point that The Good Boss, the film, really brilliantly makes, and that we, I think, on the left might need to make against both the liberal trend and the conservative trend, which is focused more on what is identity and protected categories and equality and representation, right? When actually where the most inequality is felt is in the structure of these businesses, economies, societies. And I think that's where, you know, we could say that this is. So I'm not saying diversity, equality, and inclusion is a bad idea. I'm saying it needs a structural approach rather than just an identity.
Well, I mean, but the question was also like how, and let's just go back to it, like how does the fact of, I mean, I think you're landing on it, but the fact of this training, the need
like
to
it's
talk
baked
about white
in.
fragility, how does that reflect on the change in hierarchical structures within corporations? Is it a reflection of the changeover to supposedly castrated bosses, or is it a sign of the neoliberal abandonment of traditional forms of hierarchy? And I think, I mean, clearly in one way it is, but if we can say something good about neoliberalism, would be that it came along with the pervasive rejection of racism or race as a hierarchical legitimate structuring of a legitimate way to structure hierarchies. But I would say that now with D'Angelo's approach, what she is achieving is the breaking up of the workplace employees and dividing up the employees and giving the employees something, another way to feel like they're in a precarious position when they talk to one another. It's a way to break up solidarity and a way to get a nice consulting business running.
Okay.
Because now you're being seen by a boss that isn't your boss, a consultant, or maybe an HR department. You're being surveilled for your infractions, and every interaction could land you in front of HR. So you've got this. I think that puts the employees in a more precarious position, and it is a kind of castrated boss that's doing that. But it's not truly not a castrated boss that takes to heart the way in which castration is just intrinsic to subjectivity.
I mean, what I'd want to say about that, I think you've made a great point there. Just to say, if I just say if I've got this right, but as you've got a working class or a class of workers who would be bitching with each other about work in any case, right? So typically this would happen on like a lunch break or the journey home from work or a cigarette break or whatever. What happens when, the question is, what happens when these interactions become kind of formalized and guided within the workplace itself? So now your boss might not be present, but a replacement figure is, and you enter into these spaces and talk about how oppressed you are in your workplace, which is a great thing to be doing at lunchtime, but you're now doing it inside this formalized environment, which kind of controls and polices the revolutionary energy of the worker and the possibilities for collaboration between workers, and channels them into kind of safe areas with the management of HR or senior management, whatever, but through these kind of groups or whatever, which is supposed to be channeling your oppression against, but it's actually not. So I think that's a really great point. And I'd say in terms of the castration thing, maybe we need to sort of take the boss out of the equation to analyze that, because I'd say it's the threat of castration. It relies on the threat of castration. The reason this works is you go to those things and you get trained to make sure you're not the castrated one. So it's a culture of a fear of castration on which this liberal logic relies, right? So you have to believe that you're uncastrated and the threat of castration exists, so that you will behave in accordance with what Twitter and your HR department say is a good idea. Otherwise, you face the threat of castration and you could be removed from your position. Right? So everyone is a mini boss in this sense who has to live under the threat of castration. The problem is we're already, and the psychoanalytic point which we've already made, we're already castrated, right? And if we acknowledged that we were already castrated, we could actually have a debate with men, women, white people, black people, working class, upper class people, where we made mistakes and weren't fearful of saying the wrong thing all the time, because we would acknowledge that everyone is a lacking, failed, contradictory subject who makes errors, mistakes, who is castrated by default, who is a subject riddled with contradiction and failure. And it wouldn't be a problem when somebody overstepped the mark and accidentally said the wrong thing. Because we have a society based on a fear of castration and an uncastrated idea of ourselves, we create this kind of very glass graduate, like, I don't know what, very, very paranoid society where everyone is in, and it's precisely this fear, this paranoia, which allows this liberal culture to continue and stops us having the right kinds of conversations and makes us have those channeled, safe, wrong ones, in my opinion.
I want to flash in response to what you just said about creating a paranoid climate in society. Stephen Janicki, who's been on the Diet Soap podcast not so long ago. He's my Trump supporting friend. Sometimes he flirts with QAnon from time to time. He writes, Doug's been chemically castrated by the vaccine. And before I came on the stream, I spent a little bit of time this morning talking to him about his concerns. And I want to say that I am quoting Stephen here. I do not believe this. I believe in the CDC guidelines. We would never say anything to suggest that people should be hesitant to take the vaccine. We're well within the guidelines for COVID talk on YouTube. But Stephen says that the vaccines were filled with parasites. And that if you've had the vaccine, you should probably take ivermectin just to kill off the parasites, let alone to protect you from COVID. Now, it turns out that the information that he gave me, the evidence that he gave me, was suggesting that a freshwater miniature, like microscopic creature, which does not live in or thrive within the human body, but lives in like lakes and streams, was the creature within the vaccines. It was what was it called? A Hydra vulgaris was the name of the creature, and that is supposedly the parasite in the vaccines. It is not actually a parasite at all. It's a freshwater creature. And
this is great. Keep going.
But I want to point out to Stephen, which I pointed out to him earlier, but if it's true that I was chemically castrated by the vaccine, you have to admit that I was not infected with Hydra vulgaris parasites, because they would just die in my bloodstream. They're not meant to live inside the human body. So anyway, that's all I'll say.
But let me to try and take that seriously for a minute. Okay. It is interesting that castration there, might feed into some of these. That this question of castrated, uncastrated might feed into some of these conspiracy theories and so on. And also, of course, if you think about the concept of a cuck, which ironically is deployed by the right, but we're all cucks. I mean, this is part of the thing here. But there is something about this castration, which embodies political differences and so on. It's not a coincidence that it comes up in conspiracy and in meme culture as a key kind of aspect of it. It does embody something about the moment we're in. That's what I think is worth saying, and this film does well. It's not that, because there are plenty of psychoanalysts who just want to apply their psychoanalytic concept basically to every cultural moment that comes along and just say, and this could be another example of that, right? Let's talk about castration in relation to contemporary capitalism. But I actually do think there's something, that these are bedfellows, right? This discussion about castration and this discussion of where the liberal, right, left politically are. I think this is a useful set of terms to put together.
I do. I agree that the question of enjoyment, that, as McGowan would put it, and the notion of a figure who is not restricted or hemmed in any way, or has an uncastrated form of enjoyment, is certainly worth examining today. And it has been for a while, but I think in the wake of Trump in the kind of the after effects of Trump is that we are still obsessed with this gruesome monster who has uncastrated forms of enjoyment and will dominate us all, and that the right actually seeks out this monster as a way to overcome their own feelings of limitation and fears that arise.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. And of course, the humor of the cuck thing is it's desperately grasping for a non-cuckold, So it's actually the liberal position, I think, the desperate desire for an uncastrated. I don't know. It's both. It's complicated. it's complicated. But okay.
So someone asks, "Is Elon Musk uncastrated?" And I would say, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, psychotic.
He's fully intact. Maybe.
Well, he's got a kind of psychotic identity which refuses to recognize its own castratedness. So yeah, from his perspective, I think he is.
Yeah. I kind of I feel like the reaction to Elon Musk is also uncastrated.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I just can't understand. I mean, maybe I don't know if you've got a view on this, but it's slightly off topic. But I really can't understand the everyone's obsession with this kind of Twitter Elon Musk thing. Why this is so? Why there's this fragility around it? Why does everyone care about this? It's incredible how it's kind of taken over the zeitgeist. Like I just don't think it matters.
Well, it's sort of like imagine that you were, well, let's say you were running a newspaper that was a socialist newspaper and it was fairly popular, and then a right-wing Tory bought it out and said he was going to change it to reflect the values of the Tory party. Then people would be upset about that. I think that's sort of what's happened with Twitter. It's like
do you think Twitter is a socialist?
No, not a socialist one, but it's like it was a liberal progressive social media platform, and now it's been purchased by a kind of libertarian right-wing personality, and so people are up in arms about the ideological change that is symbolically taking place. But I don't think Musk so far has done anything to change the moderation of content. I've heard that he hasn't. But I think everybody's missing the big picture on Twitter, which is also this happening with Facebook and happening with YouTube and happening with Instagram, which is that TikTok is taking over the world. The old days of reading posts by your friends and your mates and sharing them are long gone. But even the days now where you read posts by people who are good at posting and have a massive following and therefore the algorithm likes, those days are going too. You're not going to be reading or responding or reacting or communicating with one another on social media at all. You're going to be watching 30-second to 1 minute videos of women jiggling and cats meowing and whatever else the algorithm decides you are most likely to respond to in a Pavlovian way. And that's going to be the internet. That's just taking over the internet. I mean, for a time, until some other app comes along that can more directly stimulate the pleasure centers of our brain.
Yeah, I mean, okay, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I share some of that concern, but I think what I think about the Musk thing, where I would look for, if I was to, like, in the kind of Gramsci sense, like, think about what kind of opportunity is this? Like how, for example, how Zizek responded to the Trump election by looking for like the grain of hope in it rather than just saying what everyone else is saying. Trump, what a moron. And, but I would say that all social media platforms are politically biased, and they usually pretend to be neutral, or even if we know they're politically biased, we disavow that when we're using them and experience the experience as if it's politically neutral. when you've got a figurehead like Musk, whose politics are well known, behind one of these, actively saying, I'm going to use it to push things in X, Y, Z direction, it gives us a kind of language to make visible how politically structured and biased our algorithms, platforms, interfaces already are. So it forces a conversation which should have already been happening about the ways in which these social media platforms structure the future of society in a non-leftist way, in the way you've just described. That's guess what I would say would be the sort of positive effect of this Musk thing.
Right, but I mean, I don't know if that conversation, especially if it's going to happen on social media, is going to have much power in the face of the apparent extreme effectiveness of the TikTok model.
Yeah.
I mean, right now already shorts have not been around for that long, YouTube shorts, and they're already like more than half of all views on YouTube. And you're talking about a platform that has someone said, great point, Alfie.
I put that up.
Yeah, no, it's great. No, it is a great point, Alfie, and everyone should notice how great Alfie's point was.
No, but
let's take a moment to but I really, Alfie, the point you made was really great, and I didn't recognize it fully enough.
No, I want to quickly respond. I mean, because this is also relevant for it. But somebody was asking about, is Trump castrated in the chat there? And I think just to quickly answer that before I know we'll run out of time soon and go to the patrons. But yeah, I mean, I think the temptation is to see Trump as the perfect figurehead of what I was talking about before. When we go back to the film, the uncastrated master, right? Your traditional patriarch that the right likes, right? And of course, in a certain sense, Trump appealed to the right because of this apparent uncastratedness. Remember how that kind of grab her by the pussy thing had the double effect of making him kind of popular and unpopular at the same time and so on. But I would say the more interesting take on the Donald Trump situation in relation to this, the kind of castrated boss topic, is he's the perfect castrated master, and he is the thing which needed to be castrated to bring this Biden, Keir Starmer, liberal conservatism, liberal capitalism back in. So he might seem like the perfect boss for your traditionalist right, but he's actually the perfect boss to castrate, to usher in a return to this kind of equally awful, normal, neoliberal woke culture that we're in. So really his role is more to be the castrated boss for the liberals and the uncastrated boss for the conservatives. And that was a problem for the left to grapple with, because everyone was just jumping on the liberal side and not seeing that he was playing this critical role for the rehabilitation of a liberalism that we should have opposed. That would be the way I would think about Trump in these terms, I think.
I want to tell you about something that's making me feel very castrated lately.
Okay.
On Twitter, there's a guy named Benedict Cryptofash.
Oh yeah.
Have you heard?
Yeah, for some reason we keep getting the notifications for every one of his posts on the
Sublation. Yeah, every time that guy tweets anything, my phone says, "Hey,
same.
Benedict Cryptofash is saying something."
Well,
so from my perspective, all Twitter is Benedict Cryptofash railing and like dissing the left and often enough me, or at least Sublation. I mean, and what the really sad thing is, I feel truly castrated. I try to reply, to engage, and Benedict just never even says anything back to me. Just like I'm beneath them now. I got like 1,000 more followers on Twitter than he does. Still, it doesn't respond. But apparently, Benedict Cryptofash is going through a process of taking on every dissident publication and criticizing it, because from his or her perspective, because really that's just a pseudonym, we don't know who's behind the Twitter account. The dissidents, both on the left and the right, are really only conservatives whose aim is to prop up and propagate the capitalist system. And and he doesn't even see a distinction anymore between the dissidents who are like maybe congregating around Jacobin and Chapo Trap House, and the dissidents who might be interested in a Compact magazine or some other kind of maybe traditional Catholic but dissonant publication or group. And he just says, there is no dissonance anymore. There's only a conservative. Basically, the loyal opposition is only trying to correct capitalism enough to keep it going forward. And we should look forward to Benedict Cryptofash turning his gaze onto Sublation Magazine and critiquing us. I can't wait to receive my beating.
Bring it.
Huh? Yeah, we want it. I need the attention. But I wonder that I kind of feel as though Cryptofash is taking this position. And by the way, I think when Benedict gave himself that moniker, it was at a time where anyone who was at all critical of the progressive liberal position was called a crypto-fascist, right? And that's why he took that name on. And now, he spends just as much of his time attacking people who have legitimately flipped from the left to the right as he does just left-wingers. But I wonder, do you think in order to stake out this position that Benedict Cryptofash has staked out, that you have to pretend to be this sort of uncastrated master, seer of all, the one true Marxist, something like that? Or is it a real position that maybe we should pay more attention to? Obviously, we're being forced by the algorithm to listen to every single goddamn thing this guy says. There's got to be a way to turn that off, right?
There is. I think we could mute him, but yeah, I don't know. I think we should just ride it out. It's presumably the algorithm will grow up in a bit, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because that's also the conspiracist thing that we were sort of touching on earlier. Like, you have to be the one true. Conspiracy relies on the sort of the one true position kind of thing, and this is a kind of uncastrated truth here and so on. It's all very interesting. I mean, I recorded a good sci-fi with Alenka Zupancic about conspiracy, and she was theorizing this in a way I can't. But yeah, I definitely think there's something in that. But we just need to get him on and have the debate.
But Benedict will never come on, because Benedict Cryptofash is actually Amy Therese, who's actually a clone of a I don't know, of a Nosbol from 1936 or something. I don't know. It's like, well, everyone
tweet us.
Huh?
He can at least tweet us.
He can tweet at us. Yeah, he can at least reply to our our tweets. But I'll look to see if maybe I've accidentally set my account or our accounts to get notifications from this whenever he tweets, because I don't think I have. But
no, I think they're automatic. They are automatic, I think, but it's like but once because there's someone else whose name I'd rather not say on here in case somebody actually gives her some attention as a result of my comment. But there's somebody else who I actually don't follow, who I always get the notifications from because of Sublation. So it is automatic. But I think we need to go with the flow of the algorithm and really work this.
Yeah,
work
just embrace the algorithm. And the algorithm thinks that we need to be listening to Benedict Cryptofash.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Therefore, we will
take a Debordian derive through the algorithm and follow wherever it suggests we should go.
Take on a fatal strategy here.
Yeah.
And then we can go on a date. All right. So I think that we're at 53 minutes. That's good enough for this week. It was a nice chat. I hope people enjoyed it. Next week we'll have Ashley back. We'll try to be getting a guest again from the someone we published later today. Take a look at Sublation Magazine. We'll be publishing an essay on the Cultural Revolution in China, written by someone who lived through it. I think it's well worth reading and taking up, and I hope that we can get some people to some authors to respond to it, some Maoists to read this and respond. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Go and sign up to the Patreon. If you have an extra $8, go and sign up to the Patreon. I don't want Ashley to be all by herself on this live stream. She's live in London with Ted Reese. It's coming up in about 15 minutes, around 10:15 a.m. Pacific time. And yeah, thank you very much for watching.
Thanks, everyone.
In the case of nuclear or radiological fallout, people living around potential targets